Back in the day when I was a young teenager, my bedroom walls were filled with posters. And the biggest one with the prime real estate included Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, a Ferrari 355, a red Ducati, which I didn't even know what model it was, plus of course, Phoebe Cates, Brooke Shields, and Cindy Crawford. Again, I was a teenager. And my bedroom walls were reserved for GOAT, the greatest of all time. So that just goes to show, even though I didn't know anything about bikes, Ducati was the cool motorcycle for me. So today we have a very special guest, the bike that sits at the apex of the wishless mountaintop for many riders out there, the Ducati Street Fighter V4S. It's time to go beyond the ride. Before we proceed, I want to point out that this is not a stock Street Fighter V4S. The owner of the bike decided to put a lot of things from Ducati that, well, I'm going to miss most of them, so I'm going to put them on the description. In stock form, the bike is powered by the same masterpiece of an engine that the Panigale V4 has. A Desmosedice Stradale V4 with 1,103 cc's that punches out a whopping 208 horsepower at 13,000 RPM. And 123 newton-meters of torque at 9,500 RPM. You mix that with a dry weight of 178 kilograms, the power-to-weight ratio is insane. Ducati needed to put wings on the bike to keep the front wheel down, unless you want to, which it would gladly do. With all that power, you need to be really responsible and have extremely strong brakes. And this bike has them. At the front, you get two 330mm discs. At the rear, you get a 245mm disc. Of course, it comes with Brembo calipers, ABS, cornering ABS, so on and so forth. Keeping bumps at bay, you have a dynamic suspension. Fully adjustable electronic Öhlins at the front and the rear. Top of the line stuff. You also get a single-sided swing arm at the back, which, in my opinion, looks fantastic on any bike. These are forged racing wheels that the owner decided to fit with the bike. The size is the same as the stock, which is 120 by 70. The rear is 200 by 60, both on 17s. The fuel tank capacity is 16 liters, which is pretty good. It's a standard size for most street bikes out there. However, the fuel consumption, not very good. 12 kilometers per liter. Now, I'm not surprised. I mean, the thing is an absolute monster on the road, and I don't mean Ducati monster, but it does have a lot of power. It does eat up a lot of fuel anytime you have that much power in there. Just to give you perspective, I've taken this bike a couple of times to Tagaytay from Makati, which is about 45 kilometers one way. So 90 kilometers, full tank of gas. Because by the time I get back to Makati from Tagaytay, it's on empty. And that's another thing I want to point out. There is also no fuel gauge. I mean, this has pretty much everything you want in a motorcycle except for the fuel gauge. The only time you know that you're on low fuel is that the little light with the little fuel tank, it lights up. And you better make your way to a gas station when that happens. Now the windshield, it's not stock. And if you look at it, you'll understand why. I think it is kind of an eyesore. But it is very useful because when you are going at speed, whether you're on the expressway, on the racetrack, or anywhere, you will feel the wind and it's gonna come at you and come at you hard. So this, especially on the tuck position, will help you block the wind from your chest. It just goes pretty much from here and the top of your helmet and it goes through like that. So it actually works really well, but I just think it looks really, really ugly. But a lot of the things on the bike have purpose, right? So these are actually stock. The wings are there to help keep the bike planted on the ground. And honestly, I don't know if they really, really help or not, but that's what Ducati claims, and I will stand by them. I do love the styling of the bike. It looks extremely aggressive, and it is, right? I mean, you look at the headlight, it has a little bit of the flair or the taste of a Panigale, and that's kind of what the bike is. It's kind of like a stripped-down version of a Panigale. The stock Street Fighter has a pillion seat, if you want to call it that, and rear foot pegs. Clearly, this doesn't, and I think it's actually better without a back rider. Now the owner did change a couple of things in the bike, like I mentioned, like there's a carbon fiber front and rear fender and some other parts of the bike. This is actually not stock as well. This is usually enclosed, but now there's a window that you can see what's happening in there, which is quite magical, if I may add. Also the rear foot pegs, which I am not a huge fan of. He said that he wanted the bike to be a little bit more track oriented, and that's why he put the rear foot pegs. But the handlebars are still a bit high and wide as compared to the Panigale, which is a little bit lower. And that makes more sense to me with rear foot pegs. But I guess, you know, he's the owner. He can do whatever he wants to the bike. But it kind of just takes away, in my opinion, from the street ability of the bike, if I want to create a word. Because that is what the Street Fighter is supposed to be, right? The Panigale is the sport bike, is made for the track. This is basically that made for the street. So a lot of people are gonna ask right off the bat, it's a Ducati. Does it get hot? Look at the size of the radiator. What do you think? When you look at the bike, you see all the carbon fiber parts that the owner changed. Now those used to be plastic, like this, the seat cowl. And some people may be saying, you know, why is there so many plastic parts on that bike? It's really expensive, right? It's a Ducati, that should be all premium. Well, they wanted to keep the weight down as much as possible, and they did succeed because the wet weight of this bike is 200 kilograms. Now think about that. 208 horsepower, 200 kilograms wet. That's insane. The seat height is 845 millimeters. I'm 5'6" with a 764 millimeter inseam. And that is what it looks like. Now, it is very light, which makes it very maneuverable, whether you're in the city or actually even just the parking lot, that you can move it around in the parking, no problem whatsoever. All right, let's do a quick sound test. Now, a little bit of a warning. If you are using headphones right now, we're just letting you know. That Ducati exhaust note, always magnificent. In stock form, the ergonomics is actually pretty comfortable considering its aggressive nature, because technically it's a Panigale turned into a street bike. So you are very upright, the handlebars are nice and high and wide. And the owner decided to install rear set pegs, which honestly I'm not a huge fan of. He said he wanted to make the bike a little bit more trackable, but I just find it a little too sporty. Also because the handlebar is still wide and high. I just find it slightly on the awkward side for me. But I guess that's to each his own, right? But if you wanted a track bike, the Panigale would have been probably a better option. But the stock ergonomics would have been more preferable for me. Now the seat is very, very comfortable, especially since this is a very sporty bike. Honestly, the seat is a lot more comfy than I thought it would be. Very much appreciated, Ducati. Very much appreciated. Now, when you're not going too fast, it actually kind of sounds like a twin. I never really noticed that till now. The ride is extremely smooth. Not surprising because it's, well, a Ducati. The throttle response is really good, which is also not surprising. Of course, the throttle response and suspension changes when you change the riding modes, which you can do on the fly. When you're riding around on the highways or in open roads, you don't really feel the heat at all. At least I didn't. But even in the city or in traffic, it's not that bad. Well, there is a little bit of heat from time to time, which honestly I find totally tolerable. The new Monster gets a lot hotter, and so do the scramblers of Ducati. In my opinion, this bike is not ideal in the city as a daily ride. Now, can you use it on the daily? Sure you can. Same as you can use a Ferrari as your daily drive. But there are better options. This is really meant for the twisties, the open road, the track even. It's an awesome weekend warrior. I've had the privilege to try this bike on the track and some twisties, and it feels so at home there.
It's very planted, stable, and just feels like it wants to be there more than riding around in the city or on long stretches of highway. The fuel range isn't really good, as I've mentioned, but the bike isn't really just meant for, long stretches of highway going straight or, riding around in stop-and-go traffic in the city. Because with great power comes great fuel consumption. But I gotta admit, when I was on the racetrack, going full throttle on this bike, I swear to God, I heard a sonic boom.
Sonic boom!
That quick shifter though is butter. It's smooth like butter. Now the past few days I've been riding this bike and getting used to it. It kind of reminds me of when, there's a character in a movie or in a TV show thinking about doing something and there's an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. This is the devil. It really makes me want to do things I normally don't really do. It makes me want to twist the throttle and open her up a little bit more. It makes me want to weave through traffic a little bit more. It makes me want to try to pop a wheelie. It makes me want to be a little bit of a hooligan. It makes me think I'm young again. Maybe that's not just such a bad thing to make me feel like I'm young again, but still, I kind of have to remind myself every so often, okay, don't be too crazy. Don't be too crazy. I know it feels good, but don't be too crazy. Having said that, before I tried a bike for the first time, I kind of had to condition my mind that it may be a little bit too much fun. That I might get myself in major trouble. But to my pleasant surprise, this baby actually does have a kind and softer side. Sure, it makes you want to do things, but it also can, if you choose to, be a little bit more chill. It's more versatile than I had expected. And that is a really, really good thing. Now, one thing I do appreciate about Ducati Philippines is that if you walk into their showroom and you start talking to them, like maybe if Totti Alberto's there, the big boss of Ducati Philippines, and he finds out that you're not an experienced rider, he will not recommend this bike. He actually would kind of refuse to sell it to you unless they know for sure that you are able to handle it. And that says something about them, right? I mean, they could make the sale, they could make the money, but they would rather have the rider to know that the rider is ready to handle a bike like this. Otherwise, they try to sell you a scrambler or try to sell you one of their smaller bikes, because this is definitely not a beginner machine. It's a little bit past intermediate, if you ask me. Can you ride this as an intermediate rider, as your second bike? Sure, you absolutely can. But you need the discipline. You need to be a little bit more disciplined riding this bike than, say, I don't know, like say an MT-09, so to speak. MT-09, something along those lines. You can be a little bit more hooligan with those, but this bike has, this thing has just so much power. And it's such a little machine, it's so light. It can really, you feel like a rocket ship. Look, it's got wings, man. It's got wings. Keep that in mind. You're riding a motorcycle with wings. Now, this bike is just fully loaded, man. I've barely scratched the surface of all the things and all the tech that this bike has. It's just absolutely such a masterpiece, not just because of its looks, but also because of the way the bike was put together by Ducati. The styling, all the safety features, all the power, the power to weight ratio, everything about this bike, it really deserves to be at the apex of all riders' wish list. It really is that, this is sitting on top of the mountain. And when you're riding it, you kind of understand why. Because this is just one heck of a machine. It's also got one heck of a price, but a little bit more on that later. But it blows all expectations I've had before actually getting on this bike. In fact, it's so much better than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be a little bit too scary, but it's not. And that, I think, is the biggest surprise for me about this machine, because I knew it was going to be fast. I knew it was going to be able to do all these crazy things, but I did not know that it was actually going to be okay if you want to be a little bit more chill with it, which I think is an important factor with the type of bike that this is.
So does the bike deserve to be at the pinnacle of a rider's wish list? In my opinion, sure, it does. It's one of the most expensive bikes out there, and its exclusivity plus Ducati's rich history kind of adds to the mystique. And now that I've ridden it, I can understand the allure. Unfortunately, it is on the expensive side. It goes beyond many riders' budget, as the standard version of the Streetfighter V4 starts at 1,305,000 Philippine pesos. The V4S starts at 1,560,000 Philippine pesos. And if you add on a bunch of different things on the bike, let's just say it's above 2 million Philippine pesos. The bike is not for everyone, and that is fine. Ducati doesn't want it for just anyone. They are happy to be the aspirational brand, and the Street Fighter will continue to be the aspirational bike for many. For more information about this bike and other MCs out there, log on to www.motodeal.com.ph. This has been Jinno. I hope you guys enjoyed, but be on the ride. Hadouken!